In this module, we are going to talk about therapist self-care. We hope that after watching this module, participants will be able to understand secondary trauma and recognize the signs of compassion fatigue, understand the importance of self-care and how to practice self-care, and identify different ways to check in with yourself during the self-care process. First, we just want to talk about secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. Secondary trauma is very, very common for people who are exposed to trauma through those that they work with. And it's really important to recognize the signs in yourself to help you realize when you are being pushed towards burnout. So compassion fatigue and secondary trauma are really happening when you're experiencing any extra stress after working with someone who has experienced prolonged trauma or working with multiple people like that. Broadly, you might find yourself physically, mentally, or emotionally worn out. You might feel overwhelmed or feel like you're investing too much time and energy into your work. More specific signs of secondary trauma and compassion fatigue can include increased irritability and impatience, difficulty planning, decreased concentration, feeling numb or detached, having intense feelings and intrusive thoughts, especially about the student's trauma, having dreams about a student's trauma, and or having intense reactions to a student's trauma. Now now that we know the signs of secondary trauma and compassion fatigue, we want to talk about how to address them. First, it's really important to seek support and consultation frequently from your supervisor, mentors, your peers, or anyone else that you trust. You can also document the signs of any compassion fatigue that you're experiencing in order to identify triggers for yourself. Also, you are more at risk for secondary trauma if you have unresolved traumatic experiences in your life, and therefore it can be important to seek out counseling and therapy as needed for yourself. This will enable you to provide the best care and treatment to the students that you're working with while minimizing your own secondary trauma.
So it's also important to know your own limits. First, you must be aware of your own triggers so that you can remove yourself from the situation or ask someone to step in before the triggering event. In addition, it's important to maintain clear boundaries, whether this is boundaries when it comes to work-life balance or boundaries when a certain child or boundaries with a certain child or staff member. Finally, it's important to ask for help when you need it. Don't be afraid to ask someone to step in if you need to step out. Also, use your peers as a resource. If you do not know how to handle a situation, ask your peers. People are way more willing to help than you may think. It is also important to make a plan for how you will handle challenging situations. So some challenging situations that you may run into may be filing CPS reports and potentially knowing that you will have to send the child home, or that the caregivers may even know that you filed the report. Maybe seeing caregivers in the community when they know that they have neglected or inflicted harm on their children, and advocating for the school to be a place of safety, not just education, because going to school might be the only place that the child feels safe. So taking care of your health and practicing self-care is super important so that you're prepared to be the best therapist that you can be for yourself and your students. Now, we hear the term self-care all the time, but do we really know what that entails? Well, self-care is any action that you use to improve your health and well-being. Some actions you can take to practice self-care might include taking 10 minutes to yourself a day to decompress, whether that's just laying on your bed, that's meditation, exercise, anything like that. It's important to recognize your emotions by keeping a journal and writing in it when you feel overwhelmed. So maybe that's just something you do periodically through the day or just one time a day. It's important to connect with loved ones by making a phone call. Maybe that's your brother, your sister, or a friend that you can call. Maybe host a dinner, relax with a close friend or significant other. And it's also important to plan something enjoyable for yourself. Put it on the calendar, and then you can look forward to this event in the future. And then you can keep planning ahead to do fun things so that you have things to look forward to. These ideas aren't for everyone, so find something that makes you happy and leaves you rejuvenated and ready to take on the next day with a positive attitude and a love for children and a desire to do your best. Now, I just want to go over a few ways to check in with yourself. So first, I want to encourage you to be curious about your feelings. If something's bothering you, ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What triggered this? This will encourage you to examine how and why you are feeling the way you are doing. In other words, don't just ignore the feeling and soldier on. I also want to encourage you to commit to self-care. A way that we can practice this is by making a SMART goal for ourselves to practice self-care. For instance, I want to do yoga 4 times this week. I also encourage you to tell a peer or a coworker your SMART goal so that you can check in with one another. You can ask each other, hey, how is running 4 times a week? It's more likely to make it so that you want to achieve your goals. Next, I want to talk about potentially completing a personal zones of regulation and reflection. This may include asking yourself what helps maintain my state in the green zone or what pushes me into the red zone. That's something that you can easily do on your own time. Just take 2 to 3 minutes to reflect on those zones of regulation. Finally, I want to talk about the hot button exercise. This is where the therapist writes down what triggers them. For instance, I'm triggered when a student takes something out of my hand or steals my clipboard. This will enable you to reflect on what triggers you and reflect on how to react when these events occur. So we just finished Module 9 on therapist self-care. Now we are going to conclude our modules with the next module. Thanks for watching.